Well, good afternoon. Welcome to This Is My Show.
All right.
I'm here with a friend of mine, Micheal O'Brien from Peloton Coaching and Consulting. Michael's executive coach. He does workshops and team coaching as well. And he comes with a little bit of a track record, 22 years. That's a little bit.
A little bit. Just a little bit.
Sales and marketing in the pharmaceutical industry, I think it was. And yesterday was 2 years of being an independent. I mean, you're not held captive anymore by you're setting your own path.
No, not captive by the paycheck every 2 weeks. So on that day 2 years ago, I had to basically go out and hunt. So I told my financial planner, we eat what we kill. And so she looked at me and she was like, what does that mean? I go, I don't have a paycheck anymore. I have to go out and earn it. And she was like, oh. So, but yeah, 2 years ago yesterday was my first day outside of corporate America in my life.
Cool. So let me ask you, before we get into, we're going to be talking about Michael's a story that he told on Anchor that really kind of got my attention. From setback to comeback. But before we go there, so what is if you think about the last 2 years, your biggest surprise about being on your own and biggest unexpected challenge? So
great question. So I would say that I'm going to take the second one first. So the unexpected challenge is that I'm really trying to figure out how busy do I want to be, right? So in terms of irons in the fire, if you will, because now I started out, I had sort of a definition to my corporate job. I was the vice president of sales and marketing for a Japanese multinational, so the job was somewhat defined for the most part, right? It's a corporation. Now I got all this stuff out there, and I mean, social media was relatively brand new. I didn't even know Anchor at the time. And then I start building all these new relationships, and with every new relationship is a new possibility. And so I was trying to balance like doing the work that I wanted to do, which is coaching, helping leaders lead better so they can change more lives. But then there was all this other stuff. So that balance between I'm going to say how busy, and I don't like to use the word busy because it has a lot of, sort of negative connotations, because busy and significance are not the same thing. But I'm going to use busy just to answer the question. So trying to decide how busy do I want to be, considering everything else I wanted from a values point of view, like freedom and peace and health and all that jazz. So the biggest surprise is, I would say that it's probably the story around my accident. So my accident happened back in 2001, and at the time it was a big thing. And then in my corporate days, I stopped talking about it, right? I sort of recovered to a degree. And then all of a sudden I went back out and I started meeting all these new people, and they're like, tell me about yourself. And I shared my accident, my lucky to be alive story. And they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. You should write a book. You should tell more people about it. I'm like, really? And they're like, yes. And, I think, that was, the accident happened during a corporate meeting. So I had this this audience that was all just sort of captured and already there for me. So wow. I felt like, well, they're somewhat biased, right? And now I'm meeting people for the first time. They're not biased at all, and they're really digging it. So that was a big surprise. And they were like, you got to sort of toot your own horn a little bit more about that, because that can actually make a meaningful difference in someone else's life.
All right. So, that's great. So that was the unexpected surprise.
That was the unexpected surprise. Obviously, there's a lot of other. There's a lot of other.
The story resonated.
That the story resonated more than I ever thought. I think one of the unexpected, challenging surprises, because I think this is important too for entrepreneurs, is that how easy it is to make it about yourself as an entrepreneur. Especially as like, where do your clients come from? And it's, because the business is all me now, so it's easy to make it about me, right? But you really have to make it, and we've talked about this on Anchor, going back and forth. You got to make it about your clients and your mission, and you make it about them, the stuff about you will come. But I found myself, from time to time, especially when the stress was high, when I was doing too much, I wasn't prioritizing well, that I could easily toggle into making it about me. And that was probably the unexpected surprise out of all of it.
Okay. Cool. Well, you had a surprise not that long ago. You were talking on Anchor. You were very transparent and open about what you called a setback. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring up my let's see here. I'm going to bring up my do it this way. I'm just going to bring up my my iPad here on the screen. So
there it is. There's the drawing.
Yeah,
I love it.
So we're going to reveal it bit by bit here. So so there was this. You had this fantastic framework. We had this conversation. You had this beautiful framework. You talked about, you need to make when you've had a setback, you need to pause to make a comeback. And so just to give people a little bit of background. So, I mean, one of the things I've done for 30 years as a coach is I really pay attention to frameworks. A framework is, you call it a formula, you call it a model. A framework is just a way of thinking, something that is practical, that is implementable and repeatable for people. And they're really powerful, and we see them in a lot of different areas in our life. When I saw this, I thought, well, I've never quite heard this before. And I went to, you put a link to, I think it was on a HuffPost article.
Yeah.
And I went there and I read it. I just kind of sat with it. And I thought, I need to take a break. I'm going to take a little creative break here. And I decided to do this drawing. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a Vanna, well, not a Vanna Lake reveal here. And so I'm going to ask you to just give us, before we proceed, how did you come up with this? Where does this come from, and how do you use it?
Yeah, no problem. So it actually was born in my corporate days, because we had some moments where it was high stress. We were going through a lot of corporate change, and I personally, or transparently, I use this more personally than with my team per se, but a lot of the concepts I use with my team, I just didn't label it pause, but I labeled it pause for me. So sort of started in my corporate days, probably circa 2012, and I sort of carried it forward through leaving corporate America, started my own coaching practice, and I try to, again, use the principles with my clients as well. Awesome.
So what I love about that is the fact that you kind of, you were your own guinea pig.
Yeah, my clients may not totally know this, but I do practice what I preach on me. Like, I wasn't necessarily into meditation, but then I got into meditation before I was trying to, recommend or prescribe it to my clients. Probably more recommend than prescribe, because I'm not a doctor, although I may play one on TV. But I definitely try to play around and experiment, because there's a lot of things out there, as you know, Greg. And some things work for some people and other things work for other people. And I think there's, everyone needs a little bit of an experimentation to find out what really works for them.
Right. And so if something works for you, and the thing I like about the pause is it's an acronym, and it's also the word pause. We need to pause more often. There are other people out there talking about crushing it, this and that. I mean, all that stuff. We need to be focused. We need to move forward. We need to take action. There's no question about that. But it's really important to pause. And so, why don't you just tell us what the PAUSE stands for, and then we'll begin.
Well, so the PAUSE stands for, so The P is PBR in the blog post, the Huff post. I reference it as not Pabst Blue Ribbon, the beer, but more of a pause, breathe, reflect, which then triggers you into the A, which is acceptance.
Right.
The U is understanding, like why this may have happened, understanding what we can learn from it. The S is strike a pose, not from Madonna, but actually from Amy Cuddy's work. So I would say that the S has evolved a little bit because Amy Cuddy's work wasn't out in 2012, or at least if it was, I wasn't aware of it back then. So that sort of, I inserted Amy's work because I think Amy's work is powerful. The E is basically engaged, or another way of putting it, get back on the horse. If you fall off the horse, get back on the horse. Saddled up again didn't really work with pause. So E is really more about engaging again. Try to engage as quickly as possible. And I think that has a way of at least minimizing the self-doubt, right? When we have a setback, our little inner critic can go wild, right? It's perfect breeding ground for that. If we get back on the horse, saddle up again, engage, if you will, I think we can lay down a better memory, right? So, as human beings, we remember things vividly, and we tend to remember our setbacks a little bit more vividly than our really great accomplishments. So engaging helps us get back to it a little bit quicker.
And that's what I loved about your framework is the end, actually. I mean, there's a real process and a flow to this. I invite people just to continue to follow on. You may not feel like you understand it all yet. We're going to cover each one separately. And the fact that how you finish, the last two parts are really important. So let's get into the PBR. So this was interesting. So why don't you walk people through this whole idea?
Yeah, no problem. So would it be helpful, Greg, if I sort of laid out the scenario, what actually happened that led to that?
I was hoping you were going to do that, so thanks for
jumping. No problem. So I'll give everyone a little bit of an overview. So I was doing a workshop. It was my first part of the engagement with a new client. And I actually had spent the weekend, this workshop was going to be on Monday. I spent the weekend back home with my parents. Now, I'm of an age that I have elderly parents, and I'm 5 hours away. My sister is with them. She's the primary caregiver. My parents are just getting old, and their health is starting to, we got some issues that we have to deal with. And it was a weekend of my dad's 80th birthday, but there was stress involved because of the care for them. Right. And I had a lot on my mind. So I drove from Rochester, New York in the States to Boston late that night. And prior to, I was running ragged, right? I had a lot of clients. I was really busy, and I wasn't necessarily taking the best physical care of myself from a sleep perspective. And then I layered on top, going home and seeing the health of my parents. So the whole drive from Rochester to Boston, late in the evening, I got there well past midnight, right, for an early morning workshop. I thought about my parents in this situation, and it was on my mind even when I woke up that morning. And that morning I woke up, I was like, I'm off. I was physically drained and I was mentally off. So I talk to my clients often about 6 key influencers for success. One is physical, one is mental, and I was off completely on both. And wow. But I had all this stress, but I was like, oh, well, I have this new client. I got to go forward. There's no other option. They're here for the workshop. And I only had 2 hours of the workshop. It was a day and a half, and I was going to do 2 hours to sort of set up coaching and the whole thing. And I thought, well, they're here. I can't back out. If I back out, that's lame. That's, who am I? I would be upset if the tables were turned. So I went with it. I just plowed forward, even though the whole time I was like, I just wasn't present, right? And I got into the the third or fourth slide, and I really just lost my train of thought. And I was almost having an out-of-body experience. And then I just got sort of lost. I got a little warm. I got a little sweaty. I was like, God, I'm just, and it just got worse. It was like a snowball effect. And then I asked for a timeout. I'm like, can we take a break? Which I never do. And then at that point in time, I was just mortified. I'm like, here, I'm meeting some of these new people they're judging me. I was in my head, right? And these clients are beautiful people. They're very kind, but in my head, I was like weaving this beautiful narrative, and beautiful in terms of how bad it was. Because we can tell ourselves some beautifully nasty, discouraging stories, and I was there.
Right.
And so we took a break, and I came back to the workshop, and I was so mortified. I just wanted it to be over. So I sort of rushed through the rest of the slides. I wasn't engaging with them. I just wanted to be over, get in the car and go home, and hopefully put my head in my pillow and just forget about it. So that was the scene. So again, it really had never happened to me to this degree in my professional career, except for a presentation years ago, which people can read about. There's a thread there that links the two around mental misalignment and how that affects my performance. So, but I got to the car, and I beat myself up for a little bit, but I also knew that when you ask yourself negative questions, you get negative answers.
Right.
So that got into pause, breathe, and reflect. So I drove home. The drive home from Boston to New York is about 4 hours. Right. And I turned off the radio because I usually drive with the radio, something, music, news. Turned off the radio, and it was just me. So I paused. I was just sort of centered my breathing, and I started to reflect about the day and what led up to the day, just so I can get my head clear, so I could get out of this negative, defeatist type of narrative and try to start toggling into a story, because I was telling myself a story that was going to be much more productive.
Right. Awesome.
So that was the PBR part. It's just pause, breathe, reflect. And this is the first part of changing your story. The ironic thing about all this is that the workshop was around storytelling. So, and the good stories we tell ourselves and the not so great stories that we tell ourselves.
Awesome. So then how does acceptance come into play?
So acceptance comes in this way, is that you have to sort of own the situation. It was bad, right? So beating myself up about the failed workshop wasn't going to change the outcome. Acceptance is about owning it, right? That, okay, this didn't go well. It's part of you now. Fretting about it is not going to change what just happened, right? Opinion also sort of leads to accountability, to say, hey, you know what? I own it. I told my client, you know what? You didn't get the best version of Micheal O'Brien, so this one is on the house. I'm not charging you for this. I'm backing it out of my fee. And he was like, oh, no, you don't have to do that. And I said, no, I need to do that for myself, right? So acceptance and accountability is great for your stakeholders, your clients, your colleagues. But more importantly, acceptance is about, yourself. Right. It's critical for the ability to move forward, right? So there's acceptance and there's tolerance. So if I was just tolerating this, I would probably be dragging it around still. It's like, okay, I had a bad moment. It wasn't a bad day. It was a bad 2 hours. And I own it, and I'm accountable.
Got it. So acceptance is where you're coming from. It's a matter of accountability and coming to a place of intellectual acceptance about the facts. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, it's about the fact to say, hey, okay, you know what? Just own it. Like, stand up straight. Right. Be an adult, be a professional, and say, you know what? Because accepting your bad moments gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of power to own your great moments too. Right. And so acceptance is a big part of moving forward from my perspective.
Fantastic. So help us understand.
Yeah. So this is really trying to understand why didn't I perform at my best, or why didn't someone else perform at their best? These are the 6 key influencers that I spoke of just earlier. Right. And for me, I was off physically. I was run down. I was tired. I got there way too late, right? And mentally, my mind was cluttered. spiritual is not about religion. It's more about your alignment to your values and your mission and your purpose. Social is around, hey, who's in the room, who's around you. Environmental is sort of just the conditions. Emotional is sort of a derivative of mental, but mental for me was more about my cluttered mind. And so those two were certainly off. So part of the PBR, besides getting to acceptance, was like, okay, why didn't I perform well? What contributed to the situation? So stress of caring for my parents, and a little bit of guilt and shame that my sister was doing most of it, and if not all of it, being a little bit run down.
Right.
And then understanding, okay, what can I learn from it? That's the other part of understanding. So what can I take from this that will make me better the next time? Where can I grow? What's in my control? All that stuff to help me move forward. So understanding is sort of a two-way street. Why did it happen? And what can we do about it going forward?
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, so then S is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Strike a pose. I'm thinking, are we being posers here or what?
Yeah, no. Well, in the post, I was like, strike a pose, not in the spirit of Madonna from Vogue back in the 90s, but really from Amy Cuddy's work. The body, like how we hold ourselves, our body language. Actually, her research and the research she cites in the book Presence, which is her new book, really speaks to how our body position can, influence our confidence. So strike a pose is really about the next time, getting ready for the next time in terms of having the confidence to sort of get back into the game, right? And what I speak to in Strike the Pose is, body language, and Amy Cuddy's TED Talk basically about power posturing or power posing. It's also about affirmation. So back in 2008, I learned the power of positive affirmations just to increase one's confidence. It's part of visualization, powerful right. Affirmations. And then Amy's work came to the forefront on the internet through TED, really. And so I added Strike the Pose. So it's about, having, building up your confidence sort of through that mean too, from a body language point of view. When we're fragile, when the inner critic's going, right, we sort of hide, and curl up, and sort of like we want to curl up in the fetal position, much like I wanted to right after the workshop was over.
Sure.
I really wanted to just curl up and have some comfort food like tomato soup and a grilled cheese and just forget the whole day. Strike the Pose is like, it's a little bit more confident boosting along with affirmation. So this is really about trying to get us ready for the next time we get back in the game.
Fantastic. Yeah, because Anthony Robbins always said, you want to change your state, change your emotions, change your state, you change your body, move your body.
Move your body, yep.
The whole physiological response thing.
Yeah, and in her book Presence, she cites a lot of different research that does suggest that testosterone, which is a confidence boosting hormone in our body, can be changed by how we hold ourselves, right? Even how we sit at the desk, looking at a desktop computer versus a laptop computer versus a iPhone, right? So, and I got all three right in front of me, but if I'm looking at a desktop, I'm sitting more upright. Laptop, I'm sort of crunched over. Phone, I'm now hunched over. And those positions influence sort of body chemistry, if you will, based on what Amy writes in her book.
Awesome. So already this is quite the journey.
Yeah, and so
this place of overwhelm to slowing down, hold ourselves accountable. Okay, this is what's happened, and then seeking to learn, understand from the situation in terms of, these are the areas that I was maybe kind of ignoring and forgetting about, and then now we're beginning to shift the energy now.
Absolutely, yeah. So the bottom part, this from the Strike the Pose to the next one, Engage, is all around making that shift to a much more positive energy. And I think one of the big things I wanted to express in the post, and you heard my waves all week on Anchor, is I shared this one on Monday, but I also shared 4 other like hiccups or setbacks or failures in my career all the way through the week to say, hey, you know what, we can actually have these setbacks and become better for them. So, because the thing is, every one of us, right, we're all flawed, we're less than perfect, we're going to make mistakes. That's not in question. Really, the question is, how quickly can we bounce back from these, right? And into more of a positive state of mind, positive energy. And so engage is really looking for opportunities to get back into it, right? So our body, just as a species, we remember our sort of our most negative threats, right? Much more vividly than our positive ones. And so this experience was a threat, right? A threat to my identity as a coach, my profession, how I provide for my family. So it was powerful. So I knew I had to get back in the game as quickly as possible, get back on the horse. Now, luckily, I had another workshop just based on schedule 2 days later. So from a personal point of view, I didn't really have to look very hard for the next chance to get back into the game. But let's just say I didn't have a workshop on Wednesday. What I would have done is say, okay, how can I get into the game faster? And one way I did it too, in addition to the workshop on Wednesday, was to write this blog, to do these waves, to say, okay, I had a setback. I learned from it. Now I'm going to help others, right? Grow from my mistake in a moment of vulnerability. And even that can be powerful because the reaction back is, hey, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing your vulnerability. It's relatable. You know, it gave someone else more confidence. But engage is really looking for moments to get back in the game. If you're in a corporate environment, you know, raise your hand again, right? Because people are, you know, when we have a bad situation, you know, people around us are looking like, how are they going to respond? Are they going into victim mode, sort of like Eeyore, or are they going to be able to pivot? And the people, you know, whether it's Tony Robbins or Gary Vee and all his hustle and grinding and all that stuff, hey, they all make mistakes, you know, we all do. The key is how fast you can pivot out of that mistake into something much more positive. And so this week was really a week of that, just trying to share lessons learned from my life so others may be able to benefit.
It's interesting because when I saw Engage, I kind of went down this positive memory because, you know, maybe I love your ideas. One of the things I did with a client today is he was talking about what he didn't do this week. And I said, well, what have you ever, and he talked about the anxiety of making these client service calls and stuff. I said, have you ever had one positive call with a client that you were really proud of?
Yeah.
He said, well, yeah, I did. And I said, well, tell me about it. He told me about it. And so then we created this script around the next time before he begins the calls, he's going to recall that experience with that person, shift his energy, and then pick up the phone.
Absolutely. I think that's such sage advice, you know, Greg. And this is important because you lay down this good memory. Now there's something to tap into. So when we have a moment of self-doubt, if that inner critic comes back, we can say, hey, let's look and let's pick out the positive one. And that's where choice comes into play. We can choose to focus in on the positive one. Absolutely. And not feel like we have to emotionally focus on the negative one. And that's really, for me, the power of engagement, or getting back in the game, leaning in, as Sheryl Sandberg wrote,
right.
You know, jump back into the saddle, get back on the horse. It gives you choice.
Absolutely.
And choice and experience, and it's also confidence boosting, right? You're like, I can do this, right? And some of our greatest accomplishments is when we have a setback and we can overcome it and go on to great success.
Right on. So
Yeah.
Michael, this is great. I really appreciate you sharing this. And before I forget, because I might, is if people want to reach you to learn more about coaching, what's the best way for them to do that?
So one great way, so you can get to me through my website, which is www.pelotonccc.net. On Twitter, you can get me at RoadieOB. It's ROADIEOB. So those two, I'm also on Facebook. But if you get to my website, you can contact me through the email there, and or you can do a Google search on Peloton coaching and consulting. Peloton is a group of cyclists, so I'm an avid cyclist, and you can read a little bit more about my accident, almost losing my life, my recovery, and some lessons learned, because the lessons learned has really shaped me as a coach and as a person.
That's really interesting because you're writing a book about that. I heard you say.
Yeah, so I have a book coming out next spring called Shift, right? So bicycle theme of shifting gears, but also the shift in my career and shifting our mindset and shifting from a setback to a comeback. I think we're making, micro shifts, macro shifts in our lives all the time. I just want people to be really purposeful about their shifts, conscious, mindful, if you will. Use this prefrontal cortex. When we do that, I think we just make better decisions and hopefully change more lives.
I'm really curious. I have a question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot.
No problem. Go for it, man.
What do you think people should look for or ask you about to try to figure out whether or not you're a good fit for them or not?
As far as coaching?
Yeah.
So I think I think it comes down to trust. I think the couple of different things. If I would say people are interviewing other coaches, including me, one question I'd ask is, what's your experience with having your own coach? So I think there's, how do you get advice? I think great business leaders, great coaches also tap into coaching. So that's one question. I'm all credentials through the International Coach Federation, but not too many people ask me about that. They look at my business experience. Right. And I think that really they want to, they'll get a vibe as to, hey, can I trust this guy? Can I trust this gal? Are they going to come into the relationship judgment-free, agenda-free? So we make it about, they're going to make it about me, right? A lot of times as business owners, we've talked about this in the past, we make it about ourselves. We've talked about that in the beginning.
Right.
I learned early on not to do that. So I think I'm a better coach because of that. But I think the key thing is, the specific questions probably don't matter, but it's questions that they would like to ask me to see if there's a trusting connection, because we're talking about a lot of things. Some of it's business related, sometimes it's personal. And if you're gonna, share with someone, you want to make sure they're coming at it from a non-judgmental, no agenda, objective way. So, and I need to trust them too. So it's a sort of a two-way street.
Excellent. Good point. Well, that's great. Well, this has been fun, man. I'm really excited for you to get this work out there, and I think that this is just been a really interesting conversation. I'm really excited for where you're going. You're 2 years into this new career. I look forward to talking to you when it's 20 years.
Yes.
Time goes by, man. I'll tell you. I remember when I hit 10 years, and then it's like, now I just think about what. Yeah, I've been doing this like 30 years.
Yeah. So when I get to 20 years, we'll have a big celebration. So, but the first 2 years have been fantastic. I loved my corporate experience, but I have to say, the last 2 years to build something, to change people's lives, it's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I still pinch myself because I can't believe I get paid to do this, because I feel like I learn. Sometimes I feel like I learn more than my clients.
I definitely have that as well. I'm fortunate to have some wonderful clients, and I guess the postscript out of all this is that the very next day, the client here gave me a call and said, "Hey, just want to check in with you." And he gave me a vote of confidence, and I've been coaching his team members, and we're having wonderful success. And so the comeback that I write about would not have been fully possible without just a gracious client, right? And so I'm fortunate to have a lot of great clients, all awesome clients like this one. But he was a stand-up guy reaching out, no judgment. He's probably a coach one day. And he allowed the comeback in totality to happen, which is...
And what a great teachable moment too. I mean, I think that's what great business leaders do, is they take advantage of every teachable moment, because you actually laid up for him a really nice opportunity. You know, depending on the leader, you know, he might have taken that, he could have taken that a different direction.
Oh, totally. You know, it's very possible. One of the worries I had, I sort of wrote about that in the piece, is, will I lose this business? Will it just be like I'm leaving, they're going to go out to dinner that night, and they'll be like, God, who is that guy? We're going to have this guy as a coach. He was a hot mess. And to Michael's credit, he reached out, very kind, empathetic, gracious, and he's using it as a coaching moment, because he realizes that he himself will have a bad moment, and so will his team members in the future, because they're all human. Right. And what a beautiful experience to have our coach also be human, right? And so sometimes as coaches, we believe we have to be perfect, right? We have to be the experts and we know everything. But in reality is, you know, we're just as human as everyone else. And showing that and demonstrating that, it feels somewhat uncomfortable in the moment. But if we can get through that through pause or something else, it can be a beautiful moment for everyone.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that's the thing that I find so exciting. I mean, I worked as a coach for 1 or 2 years, right? And I've seen a lot of things, but it's interesting. I haven't met, because I was so busy coaching, until I came on Anchor, I hadn't had a chance to really meet a lot of other coaches. And so it's really neat to meet someone, and to meet somebody that's authentic, that is accountable, and has been there. And I said that's the other thing I suggest for people when they look for a coach. Has this coach kind of traveled at least part of the road that you've been on, so they can bring some context from that. Now, that being said, a guy like me, I've worked in over 500 clients, over 34 different industries on 3 continents. I can bring a context perhaps that some people can't, but that, you know, that's not as important as my ability to help bring perspective. And so that's what I like about the work that you did here, and how you're able to regain your perspective and then turn this into a teachable moment for all of us to be able to share in your comeback. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it, because that tells me a lot about your heart, how you are with people, how you work with people. And it's a real honor to know you, and I wish you all the best in your career, my friend.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It's always good to connect with a like-minded person. I'm so happy we found each other on Anchor. I know we'll be exchanging waves next week, and a friendship going forward. So awesome.
All the best.
Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend, Greg.
You do.